I grew up in a diverse family. My mom was Mexican, my dad was German Irish, so it was a little diversity. And growing up, I guess you could say I got to witness a racist environment even amongst my own family, right? And so that kind of paved my way in my direction as I was growing up, because seeing the way it was in my family, I felt like that was the way of the world, right? It was a racist environment. As I got older, I guess the violence and some of the abuse in the house carried on into the way I carried myself out in the streets. You know what I mean? I eventually ended up getting together with a group of individuals that I grew up with and got involved in criminal behavior, which led to my incarceration, which I ended up serving 18 years. Now, going back to school, like I said, I didn't really pay much mind to education. I remember how my mom would always take her time out of work just to put me back into school. I remember getting kicked out of 6 different high schools because, again, education was the least of my concern. And but I was fortunate that I got into a continuation school, which ended up pretty much passing me right through and gave me a diploma, regardless of what I learned, which I didn't learn nothing. So, unfortunately, I mean, if I would have listened to what my mother had to say, you know, I mean, I wish I would have taken education a lot more serious, which I didn't find out how vital that was until I got older. So, I guess as a kid also thinking about it, I think my lack of interest in education was because I didn't have the confidence or didn't feel like I had the ability to be a good student. And I don't know exactly where that played into my mind, but it was an illusion that was created that I felt like there was nothing I could do in school, so why even bother, right? So, anyways, as I got caught up in my criminal behavior, it eventually, it always started off something as being simple as doing beer runs or getting into fist fights on the streets or whatever, and then eventually getting into something more serious as I got older. And like I said, I ended up picking up a bit of 18 years. Now, during my incarceration, most of the beginning of my incarceration, I was immediately looking for change. And I just didn't know what that was or what direction I wanted to take it into. When I was serving my first 12 years in Arizona, they didn't really provide much opportunities out there. Now, when they provided any type of education opportunities, I always jumped on it. But unfortunately, they weren't well structured like Coastline College. You know what I mean? They had a more of a system that worked well. But a lot of the colleges that was made available in Arizona didn't really provide a good, solid foundation for us to do something with it. So, like I said, I was always trying to find an opportunity, and I didn't find that opportunity to 2013 when I signed up for Coastline College. And I remember I was walking through the day room, and I seen a sign on the wall, and it said sign up for college. I think it was for a summer session. And so I said, you know what, I'm gonna give this a shot again. So I signed up for Coastline College. It was 2013 summertime, and I didn't know what I was getting myself into at the time. I just wanted to give it a shot, see if I had the ability just to pass any kind of class. And so the first 2 classes I ended up deciding to take in the summertime was biology and business marketing. And yeah, that's not a class you want to take in the summertime. So, but yeah, I ended up taking those 2 classes, not knowing what I was getting myself involved with. I didn't know how to take notes. I didn't know how to prepare myself for exams, but I was graciously enough to pass it barely with a C, so that was enough for me to continue to go forward again for the next semester. So as I continued on my journey, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with this, right? I didn't know what direction I wanted. Okay, so I said, okay, I completed 2 classes. Now what? It gave me a little confidence. It gave me a little ability to believe in myself that maybe I could become a good student. I didn't know I had that type of ability. So the following semester, I applied for 2 more classes, and I passed those with a C, right? So eventually, I ended up finding out that you guys offered, AA degrees. So I had a friend of mine who also just paroled, and he just graduated from Cal State Long Beach, and now he's going to a law school. And he was also another motivational factor for me, because on the wall in the educational department in prison, there was certificates that was copies of people that had graduated from Coastline. His name was on the wall, and there was 4 degrees, and I said, "Man, I want my name on that wall too," So because of him, it gave me somewhat an idea of what direction I wanted to take my education to. So I said, well, let me start off with business. So over the course of the years that I attended Coastline, I ended up pushing, instead of going for 2 classes, I ended up pushing myself to taking 3 classes. And eventually I started to get the hang of taking better notes, the Cornell method, which worked a lot well for me. And because of that, I was able to, do better in my grades. I was getting B's and A's now. I was becoming more prepared for my exams. I learned how to write essays a lot better, right? So it was a work in progress, but it was enough to help me to become more successful in my path in school. Now, in 3.5 years, I ended up, as you mentioned, ended up earning 4 AA degrees: business, social behavior science, American studies, and arts and humanities. Thank you. So in the process, as I was taking these classes, it also gave me the opportunity to help other inmates out also, because a lot of them didn't know which direction they wanted to take this education to. So, I've always tried to use myself as an example. This is what I did, this is what I started off with, and this is where I ended up at. So a lot of people in prison are trying to look for the same opportunity, change, right? So anytime when I would see anybody that, was in the process of applying for Coastline College for the first time, I was always try to take the initiative as far as to see what direction they were going to go with it. And I always let them know, hey, you can get an AA degree. So that always lights up their eyes like, oh, can I? Okay, cool. What do I need to do? So, like I said, I felt it was the right thing for me to do anyways, right, to give right back. I think also just like the way I felt in the beginning, where I didn't feel like I had the opportunity or I didn't have the ability to become a good student, I think a lot of people in prison feel the same way until they actually step in the first day in class or with Coastline and they actually take the initiative of taking a class. And after the first couple of semesters, they start to feel good about themselves. They're able to pass a class, and they start to feel more confident about themselves. So I think it's just, there's people that want to sign up for class, but I think they just don't believe it in themselves that they have that type of ability. Sometimes I had friends in there where I would give them that extra little push, like, you can do it, man. You just got your GED, come on. You can pass a class in college. So it's not too much different. I mean, you just got to put that little hard work into it. So the things that kept me going was my end goals. And I didn't try to focus too much on the present circumstances or all the politics that would go on in prison. So my focus is always on the end goal of what I was trying to achieve. And like I was telling you, it was my escape out of prison. It brought me to, every time I go to my cell and I would, study, it was my way of meditating on something positive. Now, what people did to support me along the way, there was a teacher named Miss Eason. She was a proctor for R.J. Donovan, and she was pretty helpful in my pursuit of my education. She would always give me that extra little push and that motivation on just continue to keep pushing forward. And she was one of the ones I could say that she was pretty vital as far as somebody that helped me along the way and that supported me a lot. Now, unfortunately, there's not too many faculty or staff in there that are available to provide that type of support. And being the way the CDC is set up, it's tough to get around sometimes when, where you got lockdown incidents or certain inmates can't pass a certain line where the classrooms, because where the classrooms are set up, you have to go through a checkpoint, and they have to strip you down, and if you're not a certain class or a certain custody level, they won't let you pass the boundaries to go to college, for example. And so sometimes inmates run into obstacles where they can't even get behind the wall to go study or go to school. And so fortunately that, like Ms. Season, she's only one person. She could only do so much by taking care of the classroom, and sometimes she would actually go out of her way to go on the yard to help some of these inmates to continue with their education. So like I said, it's a work in progress. I can say over the years I've seen a lot has changed in prison as far as now it's becoming more educational and vocational oriented, and it's good to see that, because I've been seeing a lot more inmates signing up for school or some kind of vocational training, because I think in the end of the day, I think anybody or any incarcerated inmates, when they have something under the belt or a foundation that they could stand on, at the end of the day, when they are released from prison, they can feel like they have something to go to and become a functioning citizen of society, right? So my personal journey to education was, my goal is to get my master's degree. I just don't, like I was talking to you about, I just don't know exactly in what. My major right now is in sociology. So yeah, I bet you I probably know some of your teachers based on some of the syllabuses that I've worked through. But my second purpose, besides me trying to get my master's degree or trying to get that, is just to continue to inspire other people as myself to do what they need to do to push forward with education. It don't have to be just education. It could be also in vocational training also. And honestly, I'd like to thank Coastline College for providing that free education for us, because it gave a lot of people an opportunity to do something with themselves and to believe in themselves. So some of the great things about Coastline College that I've enjoyed was the variety of classes that you guys had made available to a lot of incarcerated inmates, from geology to biology, psychology, sociology, astronomy. And I mean, there's so much of a variety that you give us a good perspective on the world out there, right? So, I mean, I thought that was pretty beneficial, because to give us an opportunity to open our minds instead of being so closed-minded. And in prison, it's all about being segregated and according and be isolated to your race, right? So at least with education, there is no boundaries. Everybody's equal, because everybody's trying to pursue the same goal. Now I did a TEDx presentation. I don't know if you guys are familiar with TEDx. TEDx is a international community that organizes TED-style events anywhere and everywhere, celebrating locally driven ideas and elevating them to a global stage, right? So they had came over to R.J. Donovan to see who would sign up and who would basically qualify with this great idea, right? And a buddy of mine had told me to go ahead and apply based on, because what I had achieved already with Coastline. I didn't really want to do it because it was, talking in front of a lot of people was kind of challenging. So I purposely did not go prepare and presented my idea, and they still called me in anyways. And so at the time I was taking psychology, which was it kind of helped out, because my topic was the halo effect, or in my case it was called deconstructing the effects of the halo effect. And based on my upbringing and my perspective on society at the time and where it has taken me now, so I was able to put together a TEDx presentation at R.J. Donovan, and it was cool that I was actually taking psychology at the time, because it kind of helped in and worked in very well. Some of the tools that I wanted to mention about that you guys had available, which I found beneficial, again, was the syllabus. And I always, told a lot of guys in prison, because they always ask me, hey, how do I do this, or what do I need to do in school, or what steps do I need to take? I said, your roadmap is right there. Just open that syllabus and it'll take you right through it. You know what I mean? And so you guys, a lot of you faculty teachers have created a very well organized syllabus to, or at least help me along the way and help me become successful in my goals. The other thing that I did like was the videos. You guys always had videos to almost every classes that you guys provided. And the CDs. The CDs, I think that's also a good thing. You guys had audio CDs for preparation to what to expect on the midterms or the finals. And I think that was pretty key. And I think those are some of the key tools I think as you guys continue to grow and continue to reach out to prisons, is to keep those tools in handy, or even maybe updating them or anything. Because sometimes, like, and maybe it's not you guys, but like the institution, I know they have some type of funding also made available for the educational department, and sometimes they don't really provide new CDs because sometimes they might become scratched, or some of the videos ain't playing right because, again, some people don't take care of the stuff that's given to them. But like I said, the syllabus played a big role and to my success. While I was there, I had also got involved with a program called the Second Chance Pell Grant that was signed in by the President Barack Obama. And it was made to, I think, like 66 institutions across the country, federal and state. And R.J. Donovan happened to be one of the 3 prisons in the state of California that got that grant. And they did that through Southwestern College. So not only was I going to college with Coastline, but I was taking some classes with Southwest. And they provided the opportunity of having the face-to-face college, of course, which is also beneficial because then you can always ask questions. Your teachers are there, and it helped out. But what I liked about that was that the cohort program, again, was made up of a bunch of diverse inmates, black, white, brown. And again, everybody, once we crossed that wall, we were all together as a family. You know what I mean? So again, education brought us together. When I was talking to somebody about what you guys can do to support the incarcerated students better, and I know it's a challenge, right? It's always about the funding, right? And I mentioned the biggest key thing is textbooks, textbooks, textbooks. And the reason why I say that, because a lot of the students that I remember applying, as soon as that there was not a textbook available, they would drop the class. And even, like, I'm gonna be honest with you, I've taken that I remember I took in 5 different classes without the textbook, and I was still able to pass it with a B and an A. So, but so I try to give that encouragement to some of these students inside that, hey, some of these classes you can pass it just by doing this, whether it's watching a video or keeping an eye on your syllabus. There's certain things you can do to help you succeed. But some people are a little bit hard-headed. They want a textbook, you know what I mean? So there's probably some of them ain't even going to open it, but at the same time, but that's one of the key things that I've noticed is that they don't. They would read, a lot of the students that apply, as soon as there's not a textbook available or a current edition, they would just pretty much drop the ball and say, nope, I don't want to take the class anymore. Even though I had earned 4 AA degrees, right? I still was short on classes where I couldn't just transfer over to CSU. They still had asked me to take a communication class, which is one of the key things. Another art class. Now, arts and humanities, there's an art class that you guys have, but they still required another art class, which I'm doing right now. And, English Composition 101. Now, I did the English 135. I did the English 103. Yes, ma'am. But unfortunately, that wasn't enough for the Cal State colleges to just transfer me right over. And I think just for anybody, when you're coming out, of course, you want to just jump right into a university already, especially after, if you got 4 AA degrees, you're like, I'm still not ready? I'm like, okay, all right. So I think you would probably have to come something real creative to develop a plan like that. But I think, yeah. But something like that would be beneficial for a lot of students that are, if they know that right when they get out of prison and they're going to go straight to a university, I mean, I think it would be highly beneficial, very beneficial. There was something else that I talked about somebody. Oh, that's right. The other problem, and I know sometimes it's out of the students' hands, is lockdowns or certain incidents that go on in the yard. And sometimes, as a certain assignments are due, and sometimes we don't get to go to the proctor to have them, to watch us and take the test or whatever, because of whatever incidences that go on the yard, whether they got searches or maybe a CO is just having a bad day, they don't want you to go back there and get your education. So, but there are incidents where it kind of prevents the students from, completing their task on time. So that's another thing just to keep in mind. Earlier, I think also besides the education, I think the other biggest tool for any formerly incarcerated students is the power of networking. And I had invited my guest, Griselda. She's part of Chrysalis. Griselda Garcia, she was very vital upon my release, and she was very vital in my success as far as, of course, getting a job. Because regardless, at the end of the day, if you ain't got no way of providing some kind of income for yourself, you're not going to be able to succeed out there, even if it's just a minimum wage job. So, and Chrysalis is a nonprofit organization that helps a lot of informally incarcerated inmates that come out of prison, and they help them provide a job which was called Roads, which we work alongside Caltrans, cleaning up the side of the roads. And they provided bus passes, lunches to go to work with, vouchers for haircuts. And the lady that she wasn't able to show up today, Marlene Munoz, she was a job specialist, so she also specialized in helping people find jobs like she helped me, which I ended up, I work 2 jobs right now, one full-time, one part-time, 7 days a week. And she helped me come across those 2 jobs. So Chrysalis has been very vital upon my release from prison. Again, not only, like I said, education is a big key for any of us coming out of prison, but I think just having these type of organizations to continue to pursue education and also at the same time have some kind of income to support yourself. But also not even that, because I think with their program, what I liked about it is that it helped me develop some skills, life skills as far as for work, how to write resumes, how to prepare for interviews. And these are real life situations that a lot of us are not familiar with. And they were able to provide that type of knowledge and education for us. So again, like I said, the power of networking is very critical for any formerly incarcerated students. So that way they can continue achieving their goals in education or something in vocational, right? Now, LACC, right, this is the college that I'm involved in right now. They have a program called Break It or Make It. I heard that you guys are also trying to develop a program similar to that. Compton has FIST. Cal State's got Project Rebound. The UC's got Scholars Rising. And they're also beneficial because they help us to, for example, fill out financial aid. A lot of us don't know how to do that. And sometimes, sometimes we ain't got the funds to buy a book or a textbook. So they always had some type of way of providing some kind of income to get us a book voucher or something. So these programs were, where I'm at LACC, was beneficial for me to give me a roadmap to decide on what direction I wanted to go with this education that I had achieved with Coastline College. So I was able to have a counselor that was part of Break It and Make It, and after we had a couple sessions, decided to go with sociology. So again, I'd like to thank Coastline on everything what it has provided for me. And again, I appreciate what you guys have been doing, and just keep on doing the good job that you guys have been doing. And if you guys have any questions, oh yeah, thank you.
Let's thank John.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, all right.
I don't have a question. I just want to tell you, John, we're so proud of you, and we thank you for being here. It's clear that you have gone through a lot of challenges, but have really had the strength to overcome those challenges, and that you're a great role model, not only for other formerly incarcerated, but for us as well. So know that Coastline will always be your home, and that we are here for you. And anytime that we can help you in the future, please feel free.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to kick us off. I think we're going to try to make this video available to the folks who are still incarcerated. Okay. So I'm wondering if you have any advice you want to share with anybody who might be watching this who's still incarcerated and maybe thinking about education or in process of pursuing education.
Right. One of the things I think with for me, I had to be patient. And I think anybody that's in prison is to first, I mean, if you're going to pursue the educational path, to be persistent. And don't relax, and don't sit back and think everything's going to be handed to you. At the same time, be patient on whatever goal that you're trying to pursue. Don't expect everything just to happen overnight. And just give you an example, when I was released from prison, I wanted everything to happen right then and there. You know what I mean? And I know Griselda had told me many times, just take it one step at a time. Take it one step at a time. So it's just being patient, regardless how long you've been incarcerated for. And I think that's a very key thing. And I think sometimes people, when they come out, they have the expectations for everything just to fall in their lap right then and there. So I think that's key.
Great, thank you. David?
Okay, first of all, thank you for an inspirational talk. You mentioned one of the primary needs was textbooks. You mean hard copies or soft copies? And on a related
Because of I don't think this has changed on the custody. I think they're always going to want soft covers. Usually, if you guys do send a hardcover, they'll just rip off the hardcover anyway. So, yeah, the soft covers.
Okay, and what about computer access for digital versions?
Okay, that's what I forgot to mention. I know you guys started the e-readers, right? So the e-readers, when I was there, they were pretty handy. Some of them didn't work, but for the majority, they did all right. The other issue was, and I think this was on CDC's part, was like sometimes I would apply for a class and it wasn't made available on that e-reader. So I think sometimes that's another issue where certain textbooks are not downloaded on the e-reader. I don't know what the situation is now. It's been, about a year, no, about 3 months. Okay, yeah, but maybe it's gotten better, hopefully. But and I know it was something new that was just provided, so I'm sure as along the way they'll start fixing the niches that need to be fixed or taken care of. But I've heard CDC and RJ Donovan, they're trying to create a network, and I think they said they're going to have it up and running by 2020, is having computers available made to colleges where you guys can basically get access to the inmates, so it might be more availability as far as face-to-face type of interaction with students from prison. So they are trying to create more networks with computers. I think maybe in the next couple of years they might have it up running. I think CDC might be one of the first ones that's going to start that. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and I will tell you, so one of the things about the e-readers, which we want to express a lot of gratitude for the folks who have been able to adopt a textbook that's available on the e-reader, and there's limitations on what the CDC can access on those, unfortunately, so I know not all of our faculty have. But they told me on average, with many of them, it takes about 11 seconds to turn a page. So just think about that,
That's
you know,
true.
the next time you're going through it. So when he talks about patience, that's what I'm picturing, right? Somebody really going slow with that. The other thing is, the good news is the Wi-Fi in prisons is actually accelerated, and by the end of this year, all the CDCR will have some Wi-Fi and computer access. And they are going to be launching new personal tablets that folks will be able to actually take back to their cell and complete some coursework. So that's places we're headed, is trying to figure out, okay, how can we adapt and change and try some new things out to meet that need so that there's less of a gap and there's more instructor presence there. So anybody who wants to help with that, you let me know. Other questions?
Thank you for sharing your story and everything.
Thank you.
You had mentioned when you're trying to, when you're getting out, you want to, hit the ground running, transfer right into the Cal State, and you're having some trouble with
Right.
English and communications, is that what you said?
English 101 composition,
Yeah.
communication, and another art class. And this one, I just signed up for the summer session, and I took the history of art. But there was also another class I was trying to get into because I heard it was pretty easy, was cinema. So, but that happened to be full, so.
Yeah, the reason I was asking is, I was just wondering if you had any suggestions, like when you were in there, when you were maybe thinking about a way for us to be able to provide you those courses. Because I know with a lot of things like, well, especially for English, because you have to write papers and you have to
Right.
send those in to get graded and then to come back, like,
Well, I think if English 135 and 103 could be provided, I'm assuming English composition 101 can also be provided one way. No? Okay.
yeah, and that's because some of the issues we've had, especially for offline stuff. Like I work with a program where, we have to mail out exams and stuff like that. So it's
Right.
just from your experience being inside there, if there was any way that you thought, just kind of given what's available while you're incarcerated versus maybe a way for us to meet those needs or to kind of overcome some of those obstacles.
Now, I think, just based on what you're saying, I think the only way would probably somehow or another be doing some type of face-to-face college, like what Southwest did. And they were able to bring the teachers to the prison yard. And for example, because like communication class consists of us doing speeches in front of the classroom. And unfortunately, you can't do that on a piece of paper, right? So since they did the face-to-face college, we were able to conduct certain assignments in a group or individual introductions or whatever. And it was something that they were able to provide during the face-to-face college. Also, English Composition 101 and some of the other classes that were tough to be provided, they were able to provide for the face-to-face. But I guess as she said, as the Wi-Fi continues to get better, maybe that would make it a lot easier.
Thank you. Yeah, right now we can't offer communication and the English. We're not allowed to offer those in the prisons because of the requirements of the class, as you alluded to. But I will tell you, they're making a big push overall in CDCR to have more in-person classes, especially those two, because of the exact reasons you described.
Right.
Yeah. Questions?
Thank you, John.
Hi,
Thank
John.
you very much.
Yes, sir.
I teach two incarcerated classes, Calculus 1 and Calculus 2.
Okay.
And the first time when I teach that class, we use a commercial textbook.
Okay.
And I receive email from student. No, not email, letters from student.
Okay. Okay.
Yes. And excuse me, we don't have textbook.
Yeah.
And that's your concern about textbook.
Right.
And the semester after I decided to change to OER.
Okay.
And the student very, very pleased. And so that they don't buy the textbook OER. So
Okay.
But one of the difficulty of using OER for the incarcerated student, thanks by James, she worked hardly, very hard, to help students with the solutions, the manuals. Because with the student online, they can download,
Right.
but the incarcerated no. And we have to work with the public, the OER, publisher, to ask for the permission to use the right to send to the
Right.
prison. Okay, so that we work very hard to help incarcerated students. But one thing I like to tell you, I shared to our math department that, thank you.
All right.
You incarcerated student, you work very hard, very hard. I tell you more seriously than the regular student. And I show to my colleague in the math department, I say that your homework is not only for me, but for publish.
That's right.
So that, thank you very much. And you are very potential for the society. If you continue to work that way, and we are very proud with your work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chow. So one of the things that Chow was talking about is when he converted to an OER, which is essentially a free resource, Ty James was really instrumental in helping him create the new handbook and update the information so that they could provide the textbooks for free, because we know for many incarcerated students, the cost of the textbook becomes a barrier.
Right,
so
right.
thank you for that, Chow. Bob had a question?
OER may be defined as open educational resource.
OER means, yes, open educational resource.
okay.
Thanks, Dr. A. Okay, Bob.
Hey, John.
It's nice.
Ironically, we have a challenge here at Coastline because our incarcerated student program is so popular.
Right.
We send out, as you may know, 8,000 applications. We get back about 7,000, and we can only
wow.
serve 4,000 students due to the federal limits.
Yeah.
From the student's perspective, what is the application process like for incarcerated students? How could we improve there? And if incarcerated students are watching your answer, maybe you can give them some tips on how to apply more effectively for the purpose of completing their education.
Now, you said because of the application. I know sometimes some of the students don't know how to fill out an application, right? I mean, most of the time there will be somebody in that classroom that have the teacher aides, and they're pretty familiar as far as helping out with the filling out the application of joining Coastline College. But I think everything on that part is pretty well taken care of. I don't think there's much that I can say that needs to be changed or anything. It's pretty simple. I mean, you guys got the government fee waiver, you got the application, whether it's a new student or continuing student. So a lot of that, it's I don't think there's really nothing much you need to change, because a lot of that, even when I was first filling out those applications, I always had somebody, whether it was a teacher or the teacher's aide, that kind of assisted me in the process of filling those applications out. All I can say is that for anybody that's deciding to do that, fill out those applications and get your education, right? So,
Thank you.
Hey, John.
you
My
doing?
name's Elizabeth, and I'm a librarian here. I'm new, and I will stay here so Shelly doesn't have to walk to get the mic. But I was actually curious about resources for when students are doing assignments. In the library, we get a lot of requests when students need additional resources to complete their assignments.
talking about like Scantrons?
Well, not actually Scantrons. Sorry, I'm standing in front of you. We're talking about like students request articles for the geology class that you mentioned. We get a lot of requests about the national park assignments. And so in the library, we're trying to find ways to more effectively serve students that are incarcerated. We're trying to partner with some of the librarians and some of the educational specialists.
Okay.
So my question is, what is it like for a student who's incarcerated as they're trying to find resources to support their assignments?
Okay.
And then my second follow-up question is, how can I in the library improve that access for students?
Now, I'll be honest with you, a lot of the classrooms in prison, the proctors will go online and pull up the information, like some of the stuff that you mentioned in the geology class. I had Ms. Eason pull out a lot of that information offline for me. So for any students that, if they don't know that, I mean, there's proctors available on the prison yards that will go out their way. And I think most of the proctors will help the students out, and they will go online and gather that information. Now, if there's a certain, like for example, you mentioned geology, if you know that's something that might be asked of, I mean, it may be wise maybe to have it available just in case somebody might want it or need some kind of information regarding that, and you could mail it out. Now, but for the majority, any kind of information that I needed, I always had Ms. Eason go online and pull it up for me. So, because they do got access to the internet. So it's not like they don't have that type of access. They do got that type of access, and when it comes to education, they will go out their way, or at least Ms. Eason she will go out of her way to make sure we get that information taken care of to complete our essay or whatever assignment that we're trying to complete. So.
Thank you so much, John, for coming
Yes,
here
ma'am.
and sharing your story, because I know how much of a struggle it is to manage to earn those degrees while incarcerated, because you do have so many challenges. And one of the big challenges that I see, in addition to not having internet, not being able to communicate, not having online classes, most of the prisons don't even have any word processing equipment. You know, when students try to write essays or reports or such, and they're having to hand write them, they are
Right.
just really, really handicapped by that process, because so much of the software now has just made writing so seamless and can be taught online. So have you seen any movement there? You were at Corcoran last, did you say?
No, Donovan? Yeah,
Donovan,
so,
Donovan. Have you
yeah,
seen
you're right.
any
Most of my essays, yeah, were, and I'm sure a lot of students were handwritten, right? And of course, it looks nice on a piece of paper that's typed out and printed. And I guess it depends sometimes where a student might be located at on the yard. I mean, because there are some computers available inside the educational classrooms, and you know, it's not easy, but some of them do have access to it where they can just go on the computer and type up their essay or something and present a decent, you know, looking essay. I had the opportunity also where I worked as a clerk, and I had access to a typewriter. Not everybody's got access to a typewriter. So, and if you do have a typewriter, I mean, then you're just fortunate. So I was able to, because of my job consisted of clerking, so I was able to get a hold of a typewriter, so I was able to type up my essays. But the last, as I was released, I haven't seen anything change in that direction. Like I said, I know they're trying to advance and trying to make changes more on educational and vocational training. But I think it's probably be a work in progress. I think eventually, maybe the next couple of years, you might see some change where they're able to do that.
Thank you. Thanks, John. And I just want to say, too, one of the things that we love hearing about is when the proctors are really able to go above and beyond and pull things from the internet. And one of the struggles that our faculty and our staff really deal with is that not every institution is as supportive as that of education. So we really do appreciate the ability of that institution and that particular proctor, you know, to really go above and beyond. But I just want to make sure we know that not all of our students will have access to that type of material. Not all of our students have proctors who are, you know, as engaged. So that's really fortunate. I think we have one last question here.
So her comment actually ties in very well to my question. For those students that don't have access to their proctors, or that don't, their proctors aren't very helpful, do you think your maybe former students who are still incarcerated would be open to be like a peer advisor?
I'm sure they would. You know, when it comes to any kind of help from anybody that could provide some kind of direction, of course. I think any inmate that's already on a path of trying to make changes and go with the educational path, and yeah, you might have a situation where you might have a proctor that's not helpful and not trying to help you succeed in your path. But yeah, I think a peer advisor would be beneficial also, just in case there's that type of obstacle. And I'm sure any inmates will be real receptive to that, especially if they know that person's there to help them out to achieve their goal. Yeah.
And I think sometimes even if there is a proctor that's helpful there's lockdown situations, right? So do you still have access to other students or other inmates at those times?
No, because if we're stuck in our cell, like the facility where I was at, which consists of cell living, and if it's a lockdown situation, yeah, it's not very easy to get around. No, not at all. And then I don't like, for example, Ms. Easton, I would see her go out of her way in a lockdown situation, bring the exams in her hand, and let the officers know, like, hey, I need to get the student out, have them do this exam on the table in the day room. And she would actually go out of her way to make sure we finish, whether it's a quiz or an exam. So it's unfortunately, you don't have probably proctors that really go out of the way to do that. But like I said, I liked about Ms. Easton that even during lockdown, she would try to find a way to make sure you get your job done in school.
I think a lot of the proctors do go out of their way. It's just, I think having a peer advisor to help the other proctors be
right, because they're limited, right? Because especially if there's just one proctor in the yard, and yeah, exactly.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you so much to John for coming down here and speaking to us today. I know it, is not an easy thing to get down here, and we're very proud of you, as Dr. Adrian said. We hope you'll stay in touch and keep sharing your story, and if there's ways that we can help, we would love to. So let's just give John one more round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.